Hello and welcome to everybody. My name is Lars Sondergaard. I'm the Global Practice Director of Westernacher in the area of planning and analytics. And I will lead you through our webinar today, which is under the title Embrace Complexity in Supply Chain Planning. Now, I'm putting a quote here first. In preparation for battle, I always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. What does that actually mean? What it means is that you will always have emergencies. You would always have sources of disruption. But it's up for you to define what is an emergency, what is a disruption in your supply chain. And when you're doing a good planning, you will have less emergencies, less disruptions, until the final, when you actually do the execution, and not all sorts of stuff while actually going into this into the distribution. Now, if we look at the supply chain, earlier this might be a little over the top, but earlier when we talked about supply chains, we talked about one manufacturer having vendors, having a distribution center, and having local warehouses delivering to customers, being stores, being retail stores. Today, when we talk to our customers, supply chains look much more like this. They have an array of vendors, they have many manufacturing sites, so they have a manufacturing network. They have, say, tier 1, tier 2 manufacturing sites, they have contract manufacturers. They have regional distribution centers all over the world, local warehouses all over the world, and customers all over the world. This might be even a simplified, say, view on this, because you can also have a view like this. So again, the complexity of the supply chains is growing rapidly today. And we have many customers that are really challenged by this. Now, if we talk to supply chain managers, and we took a bit from KRC that spoke to the VP of supply chain, they recognize that not only that the complexity in the supply chain is growing, but also the customer expectation is growing. The customer nowadays much more expecting on-time, perfect delivery with the right price. And also over half are actually recognizing that because of supply chain issues, this would have a negative impact on their company's performance. Also, a lot of supply chain executives feel that the seasonality is not taken seriously and are reacting to seasonality within the top executives within the company. Now, regarding pain points, so the VP of supply chain, what are his pain points? A lot of times it is about getting a productive relationship between customers and partners. And why do they have difficulties with that? The difficulties is because of lack of insight to change the customer requirements, leading to overstocking of the wrong parts. And then on the other side, having a service delivery because you don't have the right parts on stock, so that you're not responsive enough to your customers. It's because of the complexity of the internal supply chain, it's difficult to actually do business within, because you have different regions, different systems, and also the short-term adjustments to customers are very expensive and very difficult. Again, here's some of the emergencies, the sources of disruption that we are talking about. Quite a few companies still have very inefficient and expensive planning processes, and again, a lack of system support. Now, today's complexity, some companies really are challenged by that, and some companies thrive under this. to say, how can we actually turn this into an opportunity? Now, we are asking our customers, well, what if you could have? What if you could have an agile and responsive supply chain? What if you could have a planning team focusing on what's really making the most impact? And what if you can have your sales, marketing, production, finance, supply chain team working together on the same plan? And what's the gains? What can you achieve is really sales growth, reduction of cost, and improvement of working capital. So how did it do that? So we went on a little study on literature and we talked to our customers. So again, the whole thing boiled down is we're talking about 4 steps here. First, it's important to set the right goals. Second, it's important to invest in people. So it's not all about technology, it is investing in people. Third, define global processes. And fourth, you need to establish a technology roadmap. Now, regarding goals, what we're seeing is that it is very important to set the right goals, but we also see some difficulties here, because just making a project and say, I want to reduce inventory by 20% at all means. You can do that, but you need to make a balanced business case when you do a supply chain planning project. You need to look that you have customer credibility to look at. You need to look at your working capital, but also your profit. So you can, of course, have very high customer credibility by building up your stock, but that's going to hurt your profit. And again, you can, of course, lower your inventory, but that might hurt your customers. Often what we have to do is that we need to align the KPIs across the organization. And we need to, which is fairly simple to align them, but once you actually get into the different departments, that's when it gets a little difficult, because we need to balance against the two. So we had one customer example where they wanted to keep a low inventory, and because of that, they had stock outs of 15%. Now, we try to get a win-win situation to really balance the different KPIs and work with the customer that way. Now, secondly, it is very important to invest in people. That means that when you do a project in supply chain planning, we recommend to spend most of the time on the people, on the mindset of the people, and on the process. So in this case, we say 50% on people, 25% on process, and 25% on the actual system. Now, the reality that we often see is that you have budgets and you spend your energy 80% on the system, 20% on the actual process, and only 10% on the people, meaning that the actual implementation will not achieve its benefit until much, much later, until you actually recouped from the lack of focus on the people. How do we do this? Now, our approach is we have a 4-tier approach where we first do executive roadshow. We then have involvement, manager involvement sessions, ad hoc workshops, and a specialist education. Now, what does that mean? That means that on the executive roadshow, the target audience is our executive project sponsors with the objective to educate and win over the top management team. I think without management support, you don't need to start a project. The format that we choose is typically a 1-day workshop where we talk about project deliverables, milestone deliverables, the concrete benefits, and open questions from them. It's important that we get that buy-in. After that, we go into a manager involvement session where we have top and middle management in areas such as finance, sales, logistics, and operations. Here it's important that we describe the process and the key roles, that they can really understand what the roles that they're going to have in future, the roles that the departments will have in future. And we'll do that with a series of sessions that we know that we caught everybody. Again, here it's very important to look at the integration between the various business functions. Also, we will do some ad hoc workshops. Again, here it is more an interactive way for really to make sure that the new process and the responsibility is really absorbed. We're actually looking at gamification to do this, to make it more interesting and make sure that they have the opportunity to ask questions and really understand the process in the context. And last, we go in and have a specialist or end user, and this is across the different business functions. So here again, a series of sessions. And it's important here to build on the technical skills, but also the communication skills. And also we will do that with assignments, homework, some coaching and classroom training. We intend to do these workshops also by really making sure that all regions get information. So we would also film these sessions so that people don't just get PowerPoints to send to the different regions, but they also experience a bit of the energy from the workshops and feel more involved, and it's going to be more interesting to people really look. Now, the process is the third part. The third part here, it is very, very important to define your global process. Again, it is very, very interesting to see how often we have customers really looking at very, very detailed planning, very far out, 18, 24 months on an order base. We call this, we don't call it, Tom Wallace calls it the suicide quadrant, is that you're caught up in way too much detail on a way too far timeline on time horizon. So it is very important for us to work with the client and really understand what decisions do you need to make at what time in your time horizon. This is the way that we typically build up a planning funnel, a planning hierarchy, where we start on the top with business planning. This is your typical yearly planning, which is updated on a quarterly level with the focus on budget. After that, we see, which is also often mentioned as the missing link, because you have a budget, you have a plan, and then often many people go into master scheduling. But we see the missing link as being sales and operation planning. This is where you work outside your planning time fence on really getting sales, marketing, operations, distribution, and finance aligned, and making sure that you focus on, am I capable to produce and deliver the volume? So out of this is really that you get a consensus out of it. Now after that, we go down one more detailed level on a more weekly level. And here we talk about the mix. So that means before we talked about the volume and we used the law of large numbers. Now we need to go down to the mix, so we need to know what are we producing. Your planning time fence is of course your maximum lead time plus 25 to 50%, so that you have variation on different delivery time, lead times, etc. And after that, once you have your master scheduling done, you would then go down on a daily level and really focusing on, now I know what to produce, and now I need to think about what is the sequence that I need to produce it in. Again, this is typically done on a daily level. You also have more options here that you can even go from a sales and operation planning into master scheduling, and you can also look here at demand sensing in this. And of course, on an hourly basis, on a minute basis, we are looking at yield, which is in the execution. Again, for each customer, we will build according to their environment such a planning process. It's important also to understand that if you want to do an integrated business planning, we are not just talking about production and distribution of parts. We're also talking about product lifecycle management. So you will have products phasing in, and you will also have products phasing out. Also, you would have a financial plan that's also on different level. So it's important that you align your planning hierarchies across the different functions so that you can actually work on one plan. And this is a way that we see it, that you have in PLM, you have on the highest level your research planning, on the monthly level, which is the strategic one, is development, your launch, introduction phase, and then further down going into launch monitoring. Am I actually reaching my milestones? And again, sales and operation planning. As you see here, we have business planning, sales and operation, inventory, master scheduling, as we just discussed. And again, on the business planning side, that you have on a monthly level your monthly reporting. Scalability, because what we're trying to do here is to get as many disruption and possible sources of disruptions out of your supply chain. So it's very important on your process to understand when you need to make a decision. So if we look on flexibility, the way that we build up a planning scenario is that you will always have a baseline. This is what the system can give you from forecasting and all of that. But it is important to understand that the further out you go on your time horizon, the more variation you will have between what's really going to happen. So the actual numbers. So we always work with a customer on best case, worst case, and the baseline. Where very far out on the business planning, it can go plus minus 25%. But as you go further in on your operational planning, it's minus 10 to plus 5% that things are varying. And again, it might be on capacity, so you can't just increase capacity with 25% within weeks. That's something that you need to make a decision on capacity at the right time. Again, also new product introduction. You can't just introduce a product within a couple of weeks. Things need to be decided and put onto your supply chain planning at the right time. Also, it is very important because you're going to have all these different functions together, sales, finance, is that we are always working with the clients on a dictionary. That means to get a common plan, we need to translate, for example, market outlook into financial and supply chain outlook. Otherwise, you are talking about apple and oranges. And that's a big part of a project, is to get this dictionary set up and set your hierarchies so that they fit together. Now, if we talk about a technology roadmap, I'm going to show you the planning process that we defined before, where you have your business planning, sales and operation planning, your master scheduling, and your detailed scheduling. If we will map that to SAP, which we are focused on and specialized in, we're talking about in detail scheduling, about MRP, PP based on S4. You can also use PPDS. If you go more into the master scheduling area, we would go into SAP IBP, where you have response and supply. The first three ones are all order-based. And after that here, for example, IBP demand, IBP sales and operation planning, inventory optimization. This is what you would typically use for your sales and operation planning and on the monthly basis. Again, this is time bucket based and not so much on order based, or is not on order based. And the last part on business planning, we recommend to use Business Planning Consolidation, so SAP BPC. Now, why would you pick one or the other? Now, if we go in and say, well, let's focus on operational execution. If you can work with infinite planning, so you don't have any capacity constraints, you can live with your normal MRP job in S4 or ERP, no problem. In here, in S4, you would also have some Fiori apps that you can use. But if you want to move forward with infinite planning, so you would have capacity constraints considered if you need automatic sequencing, or for example, a detailed scheduling planning board, shelf life, and again, you have further Fiori apps, then we recommend to use PPDS. If we move further, you have IBP response and supply. Again, we have finite planning, but here we not just capacity for yourself, but we can also build in constraints from your suppliers. You have prioritization of demand, and also you can do product allocations or market quotas. Also here we have the response management, which is capable to match plus backorder processing. And also one thing that we like a lot is the gating factors. We call it internally, but at us we call it the why transaction. So we know why we couldn't commit to a certain order. In IBP demand, you would take if you need more advanced demand forecasting, and also very much if you need the demand sensing. That means your short-term planning, which is not based on history at that time, it's based on patterns. And that's important, it's a different way of forecasting because it's detecting the patterns instead of just taking a statistical model. In IBP, sales and operation planning, you can work with basic forecast. And here, when you have all the different business silos or business functional areas, it's important here you would work to get a consensus-based forecast. You can do a rough cut capacity. Very important is you do your what-if scenarios. So this is the worst case, best case. You collaborate over Jam. And again, you can pick either you do it on a monthly level with inventory optimization, but you can also do it on a weekly basis. And in BPC, this is where you do your strategic long-term planning, a finance plan. You can do your profit and loss. Again, we recommend to do it with input from sales and operation. You can also do your balance sheet planning and liquidity planning here. Well, how can we help? How can Westernacher help? We can help you transforming your planning journey now. We can help you with an IBP Inspiration Day, a business case, building the business case. We can help you with a proof of concept, and of course we can help you implement the process. I have an offer to everybody, all customers in this call. The IBP Inspiration Day is what we offer here. It's a 4-hour session where you have the opportunity to gather all relevant leaders and specialists for an interactive and an inspirational hands-on workshop where we will actually go in, first understand your current situation. We will do our lessons learned, so we have a series of lessons learned based on our implementation experience, but also from our studies and our influences. We will do a demonstration of your process steps in IBP with 5 customer-specific materials. And also we will work with you to define future high-level goals for such an implementation. Regarding further information, we will find the most suitable date. We will be happy to conduct the workshop on your premises, and it will be free of charge. This is how you can reach us. Again, my name is Lars Sondergaard. These are my contact informations, and please also contact my colleague Ravi. Again, here you have your contact information. And now I would open up the floor for any questions from the participants. No? Okay. Then I would thank you very much for your time and for the half hour. Please follow us on social media. We will have further webinars where we will go into details on specific topics. I can mention a month in the life of an S&OP coordinator. We will have a webinar on demand sensing. So please follow us, and thank you very much for today.